Well, I think you're right. That was a good one to put on our album. What do you think we should put on next?
Well, you know a tune that I've always had a special hankering for? I think it's Brandin. Let's go. Wake up in the morning, shake the sleep out of my head. 7 o'clock in the morning and I'm out of bed. I hear Dad calling from the kitchen below. No time for breakfast, we gotta go. Saddle up the horses and load up the truck. Head out to the pasture round those cattle up. Those foxes don't know what they have in store. Lord, let me tell you what I'm thankful for. Brandin, put your mark on the beast, we're going Brandin. And that ain't the least of it, we'll tag 'em and we'll stick 'em and we'll notch up their ears. By the end of the day, we'll make those bulls still. Well, our neighbors just pulled up in their rig. We got a lot of help today, 'cause those calves are big. They'll kick you and they'll bite you and they'll knock you down, but we'll leave them the score when they tie those cattle down. Brandin, put your mark on the beast, we're going Brandin. And that ain't the least of it, we'll tag 'em and we'll stick 'em and we'll notch up their ears. By the end of the day, we'll make those bulls still. Well, the city folks will tell you that Brandin's a crew. That ain't a rumor, it's generally the roof. But it ain't those calves that get short-changed. Those little monsters, they'll have their share of stains. They'll knock you down, smash your face, kick you in the private place. Brandin, put your mark on the beast, we're going Brandin. And that ain't the least of it, we'll tag 'em and we'll stick 'em and we'll notch up their ears. By the end of the day, we'll make those bulls stick. Ruffling iron in the back, pushing them up. James sharpening his knife, he's cutting the nuts. On the vaccination gun we got Steve-O's. That's the man with the irons, he's running the show. Brandin, put your mark on the beast, we're going Brandin. That ain't the least of it, we'll tag 'em and we'll stick 'em and we'll notch up their ears. By the end of the day, we'll make those bulls stick. By the end of the day, we'll make those bulls stick.
We should be recording now, so go ahead. Take us away.
All right. This is the stop. I was gonna say premiere. What's the word I'm looking for? Premiere.
This is the first episode, the debut episode.
That debut. That was a fancy word I was looking for. This is the debut episode of the Polyester Man podcast, coming to you live from the Junction. I'm one of your co-hosts, Biff Bobcat Rogers.
And I'm Bud Catfish Dickerson. And tonight we're going to take you on a little bit of a journey. For those of you who don't know, we are a comedy writing duo that has been writing songs now since the early 2000s. And a lot of the material is based on true stories from our lives growing up in the country on the plains of Colorado.
Yes, we are the Hillbilly Junction Boys. And so like Bud said, our songs stem from what we've grown up with, mostly based on factual events. So the first song we're going to kind of walk you through tonight is called Brandin.
And we're going to play for you at the beginning of each podcast. So at this point now, you will have already heard it because you listened to it at the beginning of this podcast. And so you'll listen to one of our songs, and then we'll kind of unpack that song and talk about the history behind it and some of the funny parts of writing that song, some of the stories from our childhood. We are brothers, just in case you guys were wondering, that a lot of people, we don't really look that much alike if you look at us, especially when we were younger, when we first started the band. We got that a lot. It's like, you guys are brothers? So that's the format of the podcast we're hoping to do is you'll listen to a song that we've written, and then we'll talk about it. And the first song tonight is a song titled Branding.
So, yeah, like my brother pointed out, we grew up on a ranch in Northeastern Colorado. Branding's, as the song goes on to explain, city folks don't really know what brandings are about. And unless you've actually been there and experienced it firsthand yourself, most people don't know what it's about. The ups and downs, the ins and outs, the profanities and pain, torn pants and other bouts of anger and fun all rolled into one crazy rodeo. Some people, like to rope and drag them to the fire. Wasn't our approach. We would sort them off and run them back into a pen and run them up a chute and flip them on a table. So that's kind of how we did our brandings. A little different than some of the traditional brandings.
Yeah, and I'm glad you shared that, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Is every branding is different, and even in our community, I'm sure. I mean, we attended several brandings. That's the way small communities are. You kind of help out your neighbors. So we grew up. It was just Biff and I and our dad and our mom, and we couldn't have done this whole event. A branding it's a big deal, and we couldn't have done that without the help from our neighbors. So, as the song says, we had neighbors helping us out, and we'll talk a little bit about that as the podcast goes on. But we attended several brandings growing up for different neighbors, and they all do it differently, but the basics are the same.
But usually our brandings were pretty colorful. Our dad is definitely a colorful character who can put words of profanity together that would make a sailor blush, and I mean really are acts of poetry. But normally our mornings would start out with, Jason and I would be asleep. He slept upstairs, I slept downstairs. We had a small farmhouse, and he would kind of get up earlier and do whatever he needed to do, and he would step into the house and we'd just hear him and he'd be like, "Time's up! Got work to do."
Yep, and that was it. And that started the day. And then, just like the song says, you'd load up in the truck and you'd head out to the pasture and round those cattle up. And a lot of times so I guess we should backtrack just a little bit, Russ. I don't know. Are we going with our real names? Or are we doing the whole alias thing?
So, yeah. So, like our real names, like my name's Russell. This is my brother, Jason. We go by Biff, Bobcat Rogers, me, Bud, Catfish, Dickerson. So, if you hear him say Bud, he's talking about himself. Biff, talking about me. We have a lot of different names we go by.
Yeah, but Arnold Jenkins and...
Yeah, Jermaine Williams.
That's for another time. So I guess we should back up real quick, and just for anybody who's listening who is not from the country, branding is simply you're marking a calf with a hot iron to mark them as yours, so that everyone in the community knows who it belongs to if it gets out, and they know where to return it to, or most likely call you and say, "Hey, your cattle are out. Come get them." But also, it's a way of marking cattle. It doesn't happen as much anymore, at least where we grew up, but rustling and stealing cattle was and is still a real thing. So brands help protect the owners as well from having property stolen.
Like the song says, we have a line in there that says, city folks will tell you that brandings are cruel, but they don't really understand the purpose. Like, Bud said, it's to identify your calves so that they don't get stolen, and if they get lost, they're able to be returned. But during branding time too, you check for any sick calves, you give them vaccinations, and it's just a time where you take care of everything that you need to do, because what city people don't realize is that ranchers, we don't go out to hurt our animals because they're our livelihood.
Yeah.
If we hurt or injure any of our animals, I mean, that's money that we don't have to put food on our table later. Yep. So ranchers and farmers alike are some of the best people at taking care of animals and also taking care of the land, because that's what, is supporting your family.
We depend on it. Yeah, very, very true.
Dad, always had an interesting way of moving cattle. We would be on horseback, and Dad would usually be on in the pickup, and you couldn't really see him in the cloud of dust, but you could hear him and know where he was coming from.
Yeah.
But so we'd go out to the pasture, and like the song says, round the cattle up. So you'd bring the cows in with their calves, and sometimes what I was getting ready to say, like Dad liked to rev up the pickup and honk and yell a lot, so horses don't always like that. And Bud might not like me sharing this story, but he can take over if he wants. So, he was on a horse, and Dad came in yelling and hollering on the pickup. Well, spooked, Bud's horse. And
whose name was Lucky, by the way.
yeah, he was the lucky one. He was okay, but it ended up with a chipped elbow for my brother. But the thing is with Brandin's, that happened very first thing before we even got started. So he didn't get taken to the doctor until after the branding was finished, which was later that evening, I believe. So come to find out, that he had a broken arm. But that's the story for another time, and not an issue to take up with DFS. But
I think the statute of limitations ran out on that long time ago.
You bring the cows in, you sort the calves off, and then you're ready for the fun to begin. So Bud, take it over from there.
Yeah, so I mean, once you bring in all the cattle, then you got to separate the moms and babies temporarily, because you can't have the moms, chasing you or getting angry. When I say babies, I mean you're still talking about calves that are what, a couple 100 pounds, maybe not quite 150, 200 pounds.
I'd say 250, 300.
Okay, so a little bit bigger. You're talking about calves that are born in January, February, and we're Brandin in March.
Yeah, May.
So I mean, you're looking at they aren't babies, but they're still young cattle, and that is a lot of fun. And it's actually kind of fun to watch people that know what they're doing sort cattle, because if you grow up around cattle, you aren't usually scared of them. And we were sorting calves since we were probably 8 or 9 years old, maybe
I'd say
a little
younger than that.
Maybe younger. The fact that 5, 6, 8, 10-year-old boy can stand there in front of a 13, 1,400 pound cow, and so and say, yeah, get out of here, and they'll listen. It fills you with a little bit of confidence too. So you sort them all off, and then we keep the mamas separate for a while, and then you start to push the cattle up, as the song says. And maybe Russell, you can share a little bit about that process.
Oh yeah, and that, like in the song we talk about, Russell and I are in the back pushing them up. Yeah, so I mean, there is a hierarchy. The grunt part, you're pushing them up. You're holding that back leg. You're getting them ready to go. Then you have the person who's actually running the chute. Once the calf comes in there, they have to squeeze them and flip them. Then you have somebody on the vaccination gun. So it's giving the calves a shot. So you're not really in the heat of battle. It's a safer job as long as you don't poke yourself with the needle. Then, you have the guy who's castrating the bull calves. Castrating is you're taking their ball sack, you slice off the bottom of the ball sack,
snip,
nuts pop out, you cut the nuts off, and sling them usually to the dogs.
And usually, I mean, when we branded, I mean, we were looking at nuts maybe the size of a quarter, maybe a little bit bigger. So for any of you who've had Rocky Mountain oysters, that is what they are.
Yeah, so think about that next time you're indulging on the Rocky Mountain oyster. They are tasty, but they have to be cooked well. Otherwise, they're rubbery and green, and that's a whole other funky story. Mm-hmm. So then, you have the guy cutting the nuts. That's a pretty high-profile job, and you have a sharp knife, and you're counting on the grunts holding the legs so that you don't get kicked in the face and you don't, cut your finger off.
And that job has to be done right, and it has to be done well so that to prevent infection. And like Russell said earlier, it's part of the process, and we'd never have anything. We'd never have anything that would intentionally hurt an animal. So that person is a skilled. It's a skilled position.
Yeah, the knife is sanitized. Iodine is sprayed on so the area is clean, both before and after cutting. Then as the song says, the person with the irons, the branding irons, burn the brand on, which in our case was our dad. Until my brother and I got older and had our own cows, our dad, it was his show. He was the one that put the brand on, and that's like the top of the pile. So my brother and I, we were in the back. We pushed him up. When you get you're back in there and you're crowded with calves, they step on you, and they have they're the cloven hoof and the little pointy hooves. Even with boots on, they step on your toe or something. It hurts. Then you have calves that are just trying to protect themselves, and they send someone behind them, so they kick. So you got to be watching out for that. I mean, you catch a hoof, it can tear your pants, cut your leg, bruise your shin. If they're tall enough, could kick you in the nuts, which happens. But then you got to push them up, and pushing them up. The key there is you want to get up as close to them as you can. Get your knee like right up their butt, so that you're not getting kicked. But then when your knees,
you can say ass. You can say ass. This isn't being monitored by the FCC.
All right. So your knees is right up their ass as you're pushing them up. So you're not getting kicked. I just wanted to hear
you say ass.
So you're not getting kicked, but since we're not being monitored, I'm going to say another thing now. We're just going to go all wild and crazy. But when your knees up their ass, a lot of calves, they'll just shit all over you.
That's true.
Like with calves, sometimes it's logs, but a lot of times it's just like a liquid fountain that just spews all over you. So, you get shit on early on, and that's what you're covered in for.
You're wearing that all day.
About the next 6 or 7 hours. Yeah. So that's kind of how the grunt work works in the back. And, you're right there, and there's just something about burning hair and branding smoke. It gets in your eyes, it burns. You hack up a lung for weeks afterward, but damn, there's nothing better than that smell.
Yeah. There's a lot of smells that I remember from growing up on a ranch that my wife thinks I'm strange for enjoying.
I would saddle shop and horse sweat. That was a good one.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I enjoy burning hair, but it brings back good memories of the camaraderie of branding. For me, it's diesel fuel and creosote posts and the saddle shop, like you talked about. For people that might be listening that didn't grow up in the country, we had a saddle shop, and it was as simple as that. What it said, it was just a little 8x8 building, and it had all the saddles in it for all our horses, all the tack. But in there was an old dresser, like a dresser from your bedroom, and it was full of different medicines and concoctions and salves and all those
poultices. Don't forget the poultices.
A lot of poultices. Boluses, right?
And what about the balms? The balms?
Balms. There was a lot of balms in there.
Not bombs, balms. Balms and salves.
Bag balm.
Ointments. Poultices, as previously mentioned. But yeah, all those smells are just things that, unless you've lived it and unless you've grown up around it, you don't understand it, It could be like probably people growing up in New York City who love the smell of rotting garbage and other people's feces. I mean, that could be their thing.
New York listeners, take no offense.
I think that would be disgusting, but, people in New York might love it.
It reminds you of home.
People at this time, they would give like injections, like hormones, like you have PETA talking about, hormones in beef and meat. So, I mean, all of our stuff was essentially organic. giving them a copper shot, like I said, is just like taking a multivitamin. So, you're not,
Yeah.
there are no
Our
growth
cows weren't
hormones or
taking the
anything like that.
juice.
Yeah, there were no steroids or
They
anything
weren't
like that.
taking the juice.
Yeah, so like any man eating our beef wouldn't get like man boobs. There's
At
another
least
song.
from eating the beef. I mean,
Yeah, there's another episode coming at you later on with a song called Man Boobs. So, gives you something to look forward to.
I'm going to edit that out. I'm just doing it right now for your pleasure.
That's right. I appreciate that. I would try to mash mine to the camera, but that would, no one could tell what it was anyhow.
It wouldn't work. It wouldn't have the same effect. So the one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about when we were talking about bringing the cattle up and bringing them up through the chute. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be the person running the chute. Let's talk about that, because I always thought that was a very hard job sometimes because of the way the cattle would kind of, the calf would kind of race and try to get out.
So the chute, was a vertical thing with two sides that when you pulled it tight,
they called it a squeeze chute.
So it would squeeze the calf, and your goal when you squeezed the chute was to squeeze it so hard that you made the calf shit on the person behind them. So if you were able to accomplish that, it was kind of like a, badge of honor, like, yep, mission accomplished, because if you squeeze them so tight that they have to shit, that they're not going anywhere. So you would get, like a wide stance, you'd grab it, and like Jason said, the calf would kind of come in there and kind of stick their head in. If you pulled too soon, you'd scare them and they'd back up. And you never wanted to be the pulled too late. Like the calf would just bolt through and you close on nothing. Then you have to
go get that calf. Yeah, that calf hasn't been branded. Nothing's been done to him. So someone's got to go get him and bring him back. And it's a whole big deal.
Yeah. And I mean that, like when I used to run the table, I mean, you take it as like a personal failure. Like you take it as a contest between you and this calf. And, if they escape, they've beaten you, which you don't want to ever be that guy, because then even if not everyone even says anything, everyone kind of looks at you.
Even if someone else does it and you're watching, you're feeling the same thing. I mean, you don't want to judge them, but you are.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, I mean, you got to time it just right. You squeeze them in, and at the same time, you're flipping them down because you want to lay them flat so that you can brand on the side. So if you get in a rhythm, it's all in one motion. You're getting a lot of physical activity in. I was in a lot better shape back then when I had to do that. Bigger outfits that run that, I mean, that have 500, 600, 1,000 calves. I mean, that's a lot of doing that. So, your goal is to try to make it through the day without losing any. And if you did that, it was a success. And as I said, once you try to squeeze them down as tight as you can, I make a joke about squeezing the shit out of them. And I mean, that's funny. It happens. But, it also, you would think it would be painful, but it also keeps the calf safe, because if they're not able to flop around in the chute, they're not going to get hurt, Reminds me of when I was little and I had to get my ears checked. Here's a story for you that made me feel like a calf. So, like, I didn't want the one thing that we didn't talk about, so we talked about nut cutting, we talked about branding, we talked about vaccinating, we talked about squeezing them down and flipping them. There was usually one other thing that we had to do before we let them out of the chute. I'm going to kind of see if Bud can remember this critical step.
Sometimes you'd tag their ears. I'm trying to think of what else you're talking about. You're trying to quiz me here. Give me just a second. So you run them in, you brand them, you cut them, you vaccinate them. Oh, yep. So if you have a species of cattle who have horns, good call.
That's right.
Keeping us fresh. If you have a species of cows that has horns, which most cattle do, I mean, by the time you see them, on pictures, on commercials, or on your on pictures of meat and package and stuff, most of them don't have horns. The reason for that is that you dehorn them when they're little, and you take a hot iron and you you can feel like on
So
a
their
little
horns
calf.
are kind of like, would be like about here.
Yep, you can kind of feel what they call a horn cap. It's a little bump, depends on the calf how old they are. But it's a little bump, maybe an inch tall, usually shorter, and the horn is just starting. And you take a little iron that's kind of round, and you just press it against there, and you burn it until that horn cap comes off, and then
So
the
you
horn
hear
doesn't.
like a sizzling, and then you hear like a pop.
Yep. And the horns don't grow back. They aren't like antlers for deer and elk and different things. And there again, a lot of this stuff sounds cruel, but if you had a whole herd of cattle, and you're going to have them all have horns, depending on the species, they grow different directions. Some grow down. It's not quite as bad. Some grow out, and you have a whole feedlot full of cattle. The cattle can get injured by each other. The people working them can get injured easier. So that's one of the other things that's part of a branding. If you have a species of cattle that have horns,
There again, that's an important job, because if you do a bad job, a few months later, everybody knows it, and you go to the sale barn, and there is like a calf like with one
every
little
once in a
horn
while you'll
poking
have
out.
a little one-horned cow. A lot of times, if the horn gets past that state and it grows, that's why you'll see some cattle with just these kind of weird snaggle horns.
Ooh.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about what are your favorite memories from Brandin? And I'll tell you mine after you tell me yours.
I always enjoyed like riding. I had a horse named Dollar. I liked riding. Luckily, I didn't have the bad experience like Bud had, where he fell off and broke his arm. So and so after that, and Mom couldn't ride anymore because she hurt her back. So then, most of like the riding and stuff, it was, Dad and I would do that. So that was kind of the time that, Dad and I got to hang out. He had a horse, I had a horse, so we would do most of the stuff on horseback. So though, that was really, my big memories. Like every branding kind of blends together because you're in the back, and then you kind of, move up when, my brother and I got our own cows. Then we we had 34 cows. So, I mean, we had our own calves that we would brand with our brand. So you kind of move up. You're not pushing them up. You're in the back, pushing your brothers up, or, when it's your turn to put your brand on yours, you're running the chute and you're running the irons. And, it's a pretty cool feeling when it's your own. So, you kind of go through the progression of, growing up there as a kid, living that life, and makes you feel like a really important part because you're not just sitting there watching. You're part of the action. Yeah, some of my memories are, I joke about them now, but Dad at that time was fairly temperamental. So there were times that when we're younger, Jason and I are fighting in the back with the calves, and Dad, get in the house, So sometimes we got yelled at and sent to the house.
Yeah, which looking back, I mean, you got sent to the house quite a bit. And I remember coming in a couple times, and you got sent to the house, and this is how old we are. We're not going to tell you our birthdays exactly, but I mean, we were still playing the regular first Nintendo, and we had a black and white TV. And so Russell would get sent to the house quite often, and I'd come in after working, and he'd be sitting there playing Nintendo on this black and white TV.
Yeah, it's like it's being sent away, not getting kicked or shit on, you're gonna make me go inside and play Nintendo. All right.
Well, I remember one time we had some land that was probably 4 or 5 miles from our home over by Dave Klingensmith's. I don't know if we edit names out. This is the first podcast, so we're trying to kind of work this out. But we had some land that was 3 or 4 miles away, and Dad and Russell and myself had been over. We were driving over, and we were fighting. Russell and I were fighting, as we did a lot when we were kids. And
all
Dad,
good fun. All good fun. Makes the bond stronger.
Dad got so mad at Russell that he made him get out and walk home, which would have been 3 or 4 miles. And so Dad and I go do whatever we were supposed to do over. I can't remember, maybe checking on a windmill or fixing a little bit of fence. We weren't gone a whole long time, but we came back past our neighbor's house, and this is out in the country, dirt roads and fields and farms and pastures, and we don't see Russell along the road. And I remember actually being a little bit worried. I was like, where is Russell?
Hey, I appreciate that.
Well, I really was. I can remember that a little bit. I was like, where is he? Because I mean, he should have been walking along the road all sad and downcast from being told to walk home. And so, we keep driving. We don't see him. We're like, well, was he just fast? Did he run a little bit? Who knows? And
those who know me know that I'm not a runner.
We get home, and Russell was home watching TV. Dave Klingensmith, our neighbor, had saw him walking along the road and took him home. So, I mean, there was stuff
I thought
like
you were
that.
going to say I was sitting in the front of the black and white TV playing Nintendo.
Well, I remember that black and white Nintendo. The black and white TV was so funny because we played a game called Mega Man, and the password to, like, you could pause the game and reopen it with a password, but it was a color-coded a blue or red ball, a set of blue or red balls that you had to remember the color coding, blue balls, red balls. Yeah, how ironic. But that was the code. It wasn't like you typed in a number code or a password.
What if it was one red ball and one blue ball? Does that make a purple ball?
I don't even know how that works in real life, But so we left this TV on and that Nintendo on, playing this game Mega Man till the end. We left it on for probably 2 or 3 days because we couldn't. You're
invested in it.
Yeah, we couldn't log out of the game because we couldn't log back in because we didn't know the password because we didn't have a color TV. So I mean, that's kind of, I don't know. We're kind of veering off course a little bit, but I mean that's kind of what this podcast is about too. Is it's really kind of for us to kind of share some memories with people, with ourselves, kind of reminisce, but also share some of those kind of things from our childhood that I bet a lot of people from our age generation, especially from our area of the country, can really identify with. And unfortunately, that's a really small number of people because the percentage of people in agriculture is small, and the percentage then of that percentage that's ranchers, cattle ranchers, is even smaller. So there are certain people that will listen to this and say, hey, I resonate, that resonates with me.
Well, and back to the Nintendo, kind of hung up there. Most kids by the time we actually got the original Nintendo had like the 4th or 5th next thing that came out. So we were way behind the times.
Yeah.
So by the time we were actually able, Jason and I to get a Nintendo, it was so outdated. And, no, I don't think any other kids that had video games were playing on an old black and white TV set that they got from a garage sale in Buffalo, Wyoming with their grandmother. Right. That's a whole other thing of memories, like garage sales Saturdays with grandma and, her friend. Then, they took it very seriously, kind of like Dad, waking us up early, like, wake up, it's time to go. Like grandma's like, get up, we got to go. And it'd be like 6 a.m. because you had to get to.
That's when you do the best sales. That's when everybody starts. And
the early bird shopping, you get there and get to the garage sale before stuff has been picked over. And I mean, those are some,
the best junk is still there.
Those are some great memories. But yeah, that's where this TV came from. It's from like some garage sale for like probably $1 or 50 cents. That, it's like, we thought, we're like, whoa, that's awesome. We just bought a TV. It wasn't fancy. You turn knob, no remote. But, it worked for what we had. Yeah. And I mean, good memories all around. And that's kind of like what growing up in the country, I think, should be.
One thing a couple things I wanted to talk about before we end the podcast is, you'd mentioned that you and Dad, because you rode and I didn't ride anymore, and Mom hurt her back, and so she wasn't riding. So you and Dad rode a lot, and you kind of bonded that way. But you also kind of became hired guns. You would go to Brandin's together, and to do that type of stuff, and I wouldn't go. So that was kind of cool for you, I bet. And also kind of there again, it kind of gave you a little bit of confidence that you got invited to help with other people's brandings.
Oh yeah, I mean that was the thing. It because Dad and I rode, the neighbors would call, and I mean I got to go along, and you get to do a lot with a lot of different people, and they kind of respect you as I guess a cowboy of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
I never learned how to rope on a horse, but I did a lot of other stuff and put a lot of miles on and moved a lot of cows. And one of the brandings went over to help a neighbor. We'll call him the
Are you
Propane
talking
King.
about this thing?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So talking about the Propane King. That was a later summer. So
Okay. Okay.
the Propane King, who there's a song about him too, but they had this big metal crowding tub and was helping him work cows. So we, Dad and I had went over and used the horses to help them round all their cows up, and I was running the big swinging gate. Well, it was like this huge kind of like steel wall, and this cow was running fast, so I had to get the gate shut, grab the gate with this hand, and I'm running through like that, holding the gate. Well, there's a steel lip that the gate latches to right here, and about a probably 300 or 400 pound steel gate smashes my thumb between a piece of metal, and let's see. Don't know if
How do
you
you
can
do that?
see
Can you do that on here?
there. Can you see that? Yeah. So this thumb's straight.
I was trying to do the thumb.
Oh yeah. So it like this thumb right here. It's not really attached. I Velcro. There you go. So there it's back. But yeah, that's the only broken bone I ever had, growing up in the country and that kind of lifestyle. Crushed, every bone from my first knuckle forward. It was broken in like 5 places. The nail grows kind of funky, and, but that's the thing. It's like I still have all my fingers and toes. But then later that summer, because brandings, take place in the summer. So later that summer, shortly after I did that, I had it wrapped up, and we were at, back at our house, what we called the other place. There was another set of corrals where we ran a lot of our cows, like about 4 miles away, and was out riding, moving cows in, and my horse got a little cantankerous and started bucking with me, and I didn't want to hurt my thumb, so so I'm trying to hold my thumb up in the air. Well, he bucks me off, and I don't try to catch myself. So I was holding my thumb straight up in the air and like just slammed straight down on my back. And, Dad's there about 30 yards away. He sees me flat on my back with my thumb in the air. And I don't know if he thought like, man, thumbs up. I did a good job. I wasn't afraid of going off the horse. I was just more afraid of hurting my thumb again. So, I'm flying through the air with my thumb held up like this and just take the hit straight on your back. But, there again, like Jason said, anybody growing up like on a ranch with horses and cows.
There's a lot of lessons you just kind of learn inherently and taught specifically to you from very young when you grow up in the country.
Oh yeah, I mean, like working with animals, like Jason said. I mean, we're 4, 5, 6, years old, walking, through a herd of 1,400 pound cows that you you're like 3 feet, 4 feet tall, 60 or 70 pounds. You're no match for them. If they wanted to, they could run over you, and and just like that. But like Jason said, you wave your arm and you go, yeah, and
And they listen because they're stupid.
You're making like you're making like 120 cows run. And
Yep,
there's no magic to it, but it just makes you feel pretty confident. There are those cows that later in life that we got away from the Herefords a little bit, and you'd go yeah, and they'd turn and look at you. And
and that was really unnerving because
the stare down's a little dicey, because that if push came to shove and they ran at you, you weren't going to run at them because that's not a fight you'd win. You'd lose that 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. So let's see. The one thing I wanted to talk about before we finish is what I loved about knowing some of the skill or having some of the skills that we had from growing up was when we went to college in Chadron, we got to actually go. I talked about Russell and Dad kind of being hired guns for neighbors to go and brand. Well, when we went to college, one of Russell's professors had a ranch, and they needed people to help them brand, and so us, along with a couple of our friends, got invited to go help brand. So it was kind of fun to be part of that. And they I can't remember if they drug them to the fire, but we had to do it on the ground. We didn't have a squeeze chute. We
drug them and threw them, but they didn't have like anyone come in and rope them. They just had them in a pen.
And you just had to go find one. And
you would sneak in, grab a leg, and drag it out and throw it. That's a whole other ball game there. That's a whole other podcast about when you're having to throw calves.
Yeah, because that really is a 3-person job. You got the person. Well, I mean, you have the person doing all the other things: the branding, the castrating, the shots, and everything. But you have 2 people holding the calf down, and then 1 person doing all the other stuff, or a number of people doing all the other stuff. But like Russell said, it's a very different ball game because you don't have the chute to do it for you. You've got to physically pick them up and drop them
as hard as you can. Knocking the wind out of them gives you that split second to jump on top of them before they jump out. But I was going to mention, Bud, do you remember the first time we went, Eric and Travis wanted to come. So 2 friends that we went to college with, and Eric is, almost 6 feet. He's like 5'10", whatever, 250 probably. At the time. And then we have Travis, who, 6 foot, like I think he was probably 350 at the time. And they'd never done anything like that before. So what do 4, like 19, 20 something year old college kids decide to do on a Saturday night?
Small town Saturday night.
Yeah, you practice throwing each other like your calves. So I remember one of us would get like in the bedroom down on all 4s, and that was like coming out of the chute. You're crawling on all 4s. Well, so one of the other guys.
Let's just say it was in the front yard on 2 legs.
So
bedroom on all 4s.
Yeah, that could go a lot of ways south, but we're already there. So you're crawling out, and then someone else would come and like grab you by your hind leg and your armpit, flip you up and slam you. Well, I can't remember who threw Jason, but I had the pleasure of being thrown by Travis, and it's like, he's 350 pounds.
The pleasure was all his.
He grabbed my leg and my arm. He like lifted me probably like 5 or 6 feet off the ground and like slammed me down and like instantly like did a knee drop right. Did a knee drop right on me. And I mean, we did the brrr for effect, and made it as realistic as we could to let them know what they were getting in for. But so sometimes the prep work is really where it's won or lost in the brandings. Yeah. Those late night study sessions and all of that, that's what made Brandin successful. You have to practice in your downtime, and that's where heroes are truly born. Look at your professionals. You think Peyton Manning just throws a football on Sundays? No.
You think he went to any brandings?
No, I mean he's in his basement apartment in college, calling out hot routes and throwing the football.
Doing forehead lengthening exercises.
Just this is one of many podcasts coming at you. I think I meant to say maiden voyage initially.
There you go.
That was what I was trying to say. And you just kind of let it rip and roll then. But, this is keeping it real. Live from the junction, coming at you, Polyester Man.
I'd love for you to tune in to the rest of the episodes, because every episode will have a song to listen to, some music that was written Most of it now over 20 years ago, so it's classic. And then we'll talk about some of the things in the song, and we'll share some memories, and hopefully you've enjoyed it, and kind of, for those of you who grew up in the country, I'm sure you can relate to a lot of the content.
We'll share some laughs. We'll share some tears. Laughs because of tears. We'll share some pain. Laughs because of pain. And, just a life full of, damn, you can't make this shit up.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the first episode of Polyester Man. We hope you tune in to the next episode. The next episode will be Busted Chops.
Because I busted them.
Yep.
This is Biff Bobcat Rogers signing off.
Bud Catfish Dickerson. Thank you all for listening.